Today I'd like to take a look at the typical journey that an ex takes when they come back to you from their perspective. And I've come up with all of this data to kind of explain every step of the way, and believe it or not, there's only two main things that you need to understand. Well, you're gonna have to watch to find out. But before we get started, it's really important that you hit that like button to help us out with the YouTube algorithm. And if it's not too much to ask and you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the channel. So the first big important detail that we learned about our clients is that most of their exes tend to be avoidant by nature. Now, what does that mean? It's essentially a personality description. So someone who's avoidant is very resistant towards connection. They're very big on their own personal independence. Most common traits of an avoidant person is they tend to run away when things get serious or difficult in relationships. So that's the first piece of important information we need. The second piece of important information we need actually comes by studying our clients. So our clients' exes are avoidant, but our clients identify as anxious. The one unifying factor for people who have anxious attachment style behaviors is they're terrified of being abandoned in a relationship. So on the one hand, you have an avoidant who basically disappears and abandons relationships. And on the other hand, you have the anxious person who is terrified of being abandoned. So essentially our average pairing that we get coming through our coaching practice is anxious client, avoidant ex. And really by understanding how these two operate in relationships and what the average relationship looks like in this scenario, we can actually create a detailed map of what a breakup and the post-breakup period will actually look like. So there's gonna be kind of a new twist to the death wheel concept I'm always talking about. And as you can see on your screen, there are 8 distinct stages to it. We've talked about this a lot on this YouTube channel. But what we really haven't talked about is the next thing and how it relates to this. When is the avoidant most likely to come back? Well, that would happen in stage number 8. And we actually have some research to back this up. According to avoidant resource freetoattach.com, this is the point where they are free to long for an ex once that person is unavailable out of the relationship and typically out of context, so they are untouched by actual engagement and their deactivation systems aren't triggered. Let me talk about this in simple speak. One of the cool things that we've learned about avoidant attachment styles is usually they don't allow themselves permission to miss an ex until they feel like that ex has moved on from them. Because for them, that's a safer attachment. They can fawn over someone from afar without actually feeling the scorn or hurt of a breakup. So they just kind of like that. In a weird way, a lot of times what we're seeing is exes coming back when they enter into stage 8. And usually that's why we're seeing so many exes come back when you have moved on, because there's not a threat there anymore. Where our job really gets complicated is when we introduce the value ladder concept. All right, so what is the value ladder concept? Well, essentially it is a game plan that I give to people who are going through a general breakup when they don't know how to get their exes back. Think of it not as a do this to a T and you'll always get your ex back. Nothing really exists that's like that, but think more of it as this is the framework that we've had the most success with. So how does it work? Well, the value ladder, as you can kind of see here, really has 5 main phases to it. And the premise of the value ladder is quite simple. In each phase, you're going to be building value internally and externally. So what are the 5 phases? Well, you have the no contact phase, the texting phase, the phone call phase, the meetup phase, and the ask phase. Why I really like the value ladder is it allows you to do 2 things during each of these stages. The first one is it actually helps you learn and hold back so you can build value with your ex. Perhaps the biggest issue we run into in our coaching practice is people wanting results too quickly. It's just the nature of how this works. But the analogy I always use is you don't ask someone to marry you on a first date. It takes many dates and much trust needs to be built in order to get that person to say yes. The same principle applies after a breakup and trying to get into a relationship with a person you were previously in a relationship with. There's this natural assumption that because you were in a previous relationship with this ex, you don't need to put in the work to get back there. You can just kind of skip all the steps. I hate to break it to you, but that's not the case at all. So obviously, using each one of these phases can allow you to build up credibility, but the second really cool thing is it also gives you an opportunity to ask if this is something that you really want. By slowing down we're basically going to be putting you through a gauntlet of situations emotionally where we're going to be asking you, is this something you really want? Because if it's not, that's okay. That's what the value ladder is intended to do. It's meant to, at one point, build value so your ex looks at you as more valuable than they are. But number two, helps you realize if this is something that you really want to do. But how does this relate to the journey from your ex's perspective of you coming back? Well, that's where things get really fun, because what we're going to be trying to do is combining the value ladder concept with the relationship wheel concept and together. So what I'm going to do is throw a graphic up on the screen right now. And what you can see is I've divided the relationship wheel into two distinct parts. We have the relationship part, and then we have the breakup part of the wheel. Where does the value ladder come in to this equation? Believe it or not, your value ladder starts immediately upon the outset of a breakup. So when your ex breaks up with you or you break up with your ex, that's when you are supposed to be engaging in the value ladder, assuming you're following our way of doing things. But where people tend to run in trouble is they don't know during which of the stage 5, 6, 7, or 8 that are left over in the breakup stages do they kind of unleash the rest of the wheel. Oftentimes they're rushing through it to get the result as quick as possible and they fall flat on their face. So what gives? Well, I thought it'd be kind of cool to take stages 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the relationship wheel and input the value ladder on top of it so you can see during which stages of this you should be kind of engaging in the different sections or phases of the value ladder. So let's start first with the no contact rule. That is obviously the very first stage of the value ladder. Where does it fall within the purview of this circle? Believe it or not, the no contact rule should take up stages 5 and 6 of the relationship wheel. This is when your ex leaves the relationship, they break up with you, and then they're really happy that they left. We often call this separation elation. It's kind of the I got my freedom back moment. Well, the mistake most people make is they do too short of a no contact rule so that their ex is still in that separation elation period, and then they're reaching out. And usually their ex has no interest in even rekindling or talking to them at all. So instead, I'm actually more of a fan of longer periods of no contact. This is one of the more recent changes I've had to go through with my practice. So I used to recommend 30 days of no contact. We're seeing more results with longer periods of no contact, up to 45 days. Anything past 45 days tends to be pushing it a little bit still, but stages 5 and 6 are going to be encompassed in the no contact rule. Now, why so long? I mean, stages 5 and 6 could last months. Well, that's where really the first test comes in for you. While you're being apart from your ex, you need to be asking yourself, is this something that you really want to do? Oftentimes, a lot of times people come into our program, they're gung-ho about getting their exes back, but they're in an emotional state of mind. Well, the no contact rule forces you to slow down so that you can think about things. And on average, our research has indicated it's going to take anywhere between 5 to 7 months to go through the beginning of the value ladder to the end of the value ladder where you successfully win an ex back, assuming that's what you're trying to do. Is that a time commitment that you're willing to dedicate yourself to? Because it's not the kind of thing that you can sort of just half measure. You actually have to go full on into it. And if you're asking yourself these questions and answering, no, I don't want to wait that long, then that might be a key indication that it's time for you to move on. Stages 5 and 6 are the stages that your ex is most unlikely to respond to you. So rather than ending no contact early and texting during these stages, you're most likely not going to get a response. So to me, it makes the most sense tactically to have the no contact rule during these stages so that you're actually a lot more likely to get a response during the texting phase and the phone call phase when that phase comes. Now, speaking of which, the texting phase and the phone call phase really kick in during stage 7 of the wheel. Stage 7, if you weren't aware, is when your ex starts to feel kind of lonely. In other words, the effects of the breakup have begun to hit him or her. So obviously the way the value ladder works is you're stair-stepping your way up to the top, but in this specific case, you're doing it within this phase where your ex is starting to feel kind of lonely. So the first thing you do is begin conversations with them through text message that's very non-threatening, slowly build attraction up, and then try to sprinkle in some phone calls so that you can just have both phone calls and text message value ladder built in this stage. Which leads us very nicely to the 8th and final stage of the wheel, which is the, well, why can't I ever find the right person? I've stated already that this is the stage where your ex is most likely to take you back. This is where nostalgia has kind of kicked in a little bit, especially since you've begun talking to them. They're looking at you potentially as a way to fulfill their loneliness. And this is where you're going to want to engage in the meetup phase and the ask phase. But in my opinion, these two phases are going to only be as successful as all the phases that came before it. So with the no contact rule, with texting, with phone calls, if you haven't done a good enough job building value within those stages, then you're gonna fall flat on your face pretty much no matter what. It all works together synergistically, but this brings up an interesting question. How is value built? The 4 most common ways to build value are through having meaningful conversations, doing something that makes them admire you, you finding something else that you care about more than your ex, because that kind of plays hard to get a little bit, and flirting. Those are the ways you build value and attraction. So if you've not done a decent job at those 4 things in the previous stages, then by the time you ask them out on a date, by the time you kind of put yourself in a situation where they will be willing to potentially ask you out again, they're not really going to be there emotionally yet because you haven't built enough value. Everything we're doing here is to get your ex from a different state of mind. So when they enter into stage 8, they're thinking, why can't I ever find the right person? Why is this always happening to me? I go through a breakup, I find someone, it feels great. Something is wrong. They're not as perfect as I thought. I break up with them, I'm happy, then I get depressed, and then I'm sitting here again. Why can't I ever find the right person? The value ladder is literally designed to change that paradigm. So instead of saying, why can't I ever find the right person? They're saying, I already found the right person. Why did I let them go? But that is only, getting them to that headspace is only going to happen if you're able to successfully build value along the way. And the secret thing that no one ever tells you is that arguably the best way to build value is indeed to find something else that you care about. Because this causes you to shift your priorities so that you're not worried so much about what they're thinking, you're more worried about your own life. And that is always time well spent. I'm gonna leave you with this. The most invaluable resource that you have is your time and how you're investing it. So as you're going through these stages and as you're trying to understand what your ex is going through, always be asking yourself, am I investing my time wisely in this endeavor? If your head is saying no, but your heart is saying yes, there's a disconnect. And the tiebreaker should always be your gut. If in your gut you know you're kind of lying to yourself, move on. It's not worth it. On average, getting from this spot, stage 5, all the way up to stage 8 successfully is gonna take almost 6 months. That's half a year to get from one end to the other. That's half a year of opportunities missed finding potentially your soulmate. So ask yourself at the end of the day if this is something that you want. Listen to your gut.